Hi class, I know that it's hard for us to be away from each other. Please stay home and be safe, be healthy, try not to be in crowds, keep some distance. But we are home and it's a good opportunity to cook a good comfort food while that we're home. So I'm going to teach you how to make unstuffed cabbage rolls. This is a favorite recipe of mine. And it's delicious, it's very healthy, it's very economical to make. And for the people who are keto crazy, this is right up their alley. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take a package of ground beef. Somewhere between 1 to 2 pounds is usually good. It doesn't have to be an exact measurement for this type of recipe. So we're just gonna take this, and I always practice best practices with my thawing techniques. You know, the days of leaving your meat on the counter all day for it to thaw, those are long gone. This is a frozen state. I'm just going to set it in here. Now this black foam, that will come off. I'm just going to turn my oven on to about, or my stovetop on to about medium, and then this will start to heat up. In fact, I'll even put a cover on it to help it to heat up. And then as it does, I'll be able to peel that black foam off. Make sure it doesn't touch the sides or anything, because if it does, then it could melt down into your meat. You certainly don't want that. That could be dangerous. So let me find my lid. Oh, and I do need to mention, before I started, I washed my hands thoroughly and I sanitized the surface where I was going to be working, but I just touched raw meat again, so I'm gonna rewash. Anytime you touch raw meat, you have to rewash your hands before you start your next step. And you wanna do a thorough hand washing. Make sure you get every digit, the top of your hand, the inside, between each finger. And in an industrial kitchen or in a commercial kitchen setting, you would not be wearing rings. I shouldn't have rings on, but I do because this is a home kitchen setting. It's informal. I certainly wouldn't take my rings off to cook at home. But if you are working out in the industry, you need to take those rings off. You need to put your hair up if you are working out in the world, in the industry. Now, while that's getting started, the ground beef is going to start heating up, and as it does, we're going to shave it back a little bit at a time and let that continue to brown. I am going to add a half cup of onion to that ground beef and a tablespoon of minced garlic. This minced garlic is really handy because the shelf life on it is very long, and you don't have to do the cutting and the chopping yourself. Now, fresh garlic's always best, but this minced garlic is a really good fill-in. Now, for my onions, I like to use the frozen diced onions. Once you cut into an onion can start to become toxic very shortly after it's cut. So it is always recommended that you not like use half an onion and then stick it in the fridge. You should never do that. You should cut the whole onion and freeze half of it if you're only going to use half, because freezing is the only thing that will stop that growth of bacteria that causes that toxicity in onions. So I use the frozen already diced onions because number one, it's easier. And number two, I don't ever have to worry about how that I'm storing the onions after they're being cut. I just measure out what I want and then put the rest back into the freezer. And also then you don't mess up your eye makeup, ladies, because cutting onions, as you know, can be very tearful, a tearful experience. Okay, now, while that beef is getting started, I'm going to go ahead and cut my cabbage. Cabbages are very inexpensive and very easy to work with. And most people actually like cabbage. They don't know that they like it, but they do. Oftentimes when you put it into a recipe, they're just eating it, but they don't know what it is. They like, it's in a lot of different Chinese foods, and people don't question it or say anything about it. Of course, coleslaw uses cabbage, but cabbage is inexpensive and it's a very healthy food. This is like a super food. This is a power food. There are so many good vitamins and nutrients in this head of cabbage right here that it really is beneficial to your health. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a very sharp, in my case, I'm using a serrated, probably an 8-inch serrated knife, but you could use a straight knife. It has to be very sharp, but because that I'm kind of short, you can see the angle I have to get at to cut a cabbage. For me, having that sawing motion helps, so I usually use a serrated, but I have seen taller chefs use a straight blade, like a chef's knife, for example, to cut cabbage, and they are successful as well. Always make sure that when you hold your cabbage, that you are holding it in such a way that the blade, like you wouldn't want to hold it like this, because you can see right here that that blade would easily nick your finger. Always use really sharp instruments when you're cooking, because sharp knives aren't dangerous. Sharp knives are safer. That's a misconception that, let the children in the family use the dull knife to learn to cook. And that's simply not true, because with a dull knife, people start doing different things to try to compensate for the dullness of the knife, and it can be very dangerous. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm just coring this cabbage. And coring cabbage is just as simple.
If you're having trouble keeping the cutting board still, you can put a paper towel, a wetted paper towel under it.
Yes.
Keep it still.
Yes, my daughter is filming, and she's my student, my daughter, my videographer today, and she's super smart about cooking, because she is in the junior chef, and she also has me for a teacher at school and here at home. So she knows a lot about different cooking tips, tidbits, techniques, things like that. She is saying that if your cutting board is dancing all over your surface, like this one sort of is, one of the things that you can do is you can wet a paper towel and place it underneath in order to keep it still. Now, I just usually deal with the jiggle because I'm used to it. I'm like, okay. But you can remedy that if you need to. The pieces of cabbage, I went across, and now I turned the head, and now I'm going across again. That's fine. People have different ways that they cut cabbage. Some people like their cabbage cut very finely, almost like that you would have it in coleslaw. But I personally like my lettuce to be a little chunky. Not lettuce, I'm sorry. I'm saying lettuce, I mean cabbage, you know what I mean. But I like it a little chunky, because I like to stab it with the fork and eat it, a big piece of it. I love the flavor of it, and I know that it's so darn good for me. Now, let's go over here. We're going to check really quickly on our meat. Okay, I'm going to remove the foam that's out of there. Okay. Now, I have Rachel Ray cookware, and I love it, but it is non-stick. So you need to use, with non-stick, you always want to use a spatula that's plastic, because you want to not scratch that surface, that non-stick surface, because once the non-stick surface has been scratched or damaged in any way, it can start to leach out toxins into your food. So every time you do your dishes, you should be inspecting your cookware to make sure that there's no dents and divots or piercing of that coating. But there usually isn't if you are careful and you use the right types of utensils. Now that meat, it's starting to come together. While that's cooking, I'm going to go ahead and add, this is a 1/2 cup of onion, diced onion. Here I have some garlic. This is a 1 tablespoon. And I'm going to do a heaping tablespoon because I really like garlic. So that doesn't bother me. And measurements, you know, a lot of people measure very specifically when following a recipe. But people who are really comfortable in the kitchen, you get to where you can eyeball a measurement. Or you just know that certain things you don't have to be precise with. And people have asked me, like, what are the things that you need to be precise, follow a recipe, and what are the things that you can kind of go with the flow and do whatever works for you as far as a measurement, you know, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Generally speaking, if it's something you would eat for lunch or dinner, you can fudge those amounts a little bit. If it is something that you would bake in the oven, like a dessert, then usually you have to be very precise or it won't turn out. But like if the recipe says, you know, a 1/2 tablespoon of brown sugar, for example, and you're adding it to your cabbage rolls, which we are going to add some brown sugar. But if it said 1/2 tablespoon, you could add a whole tablespoon. If you like things sweet, you can add that, and that's not going to cause any problem whatsoever. As the knife gets closer to my hand, you notice that my hand just kind of automatically goes into a claw. That's a safety thing. You want to cut with your claw for your supporting hand and your cutting blade. They work together, but then that way you're less likely to have an injury. I love the smell of cabbage. I actually like it raw. I don't like coleslaw. I know everybody and their uncle tries to tell me, oh, but my Aunt Becky makes the best. You would love hers. I have tried everybody's Aunt Becky's coleslaw. I have tried everybody's Aunt Susie's coleslaw, or Aunt Joanne, or Mama Sugar's. I've tried everybody's. I don't care for it. I don't know what that combination of flavors does in my mouth, but it's not my fave. Just not a coleslaw person, but I do love cabbage. But there's lots of things to do with cabbage other than coleslaw. But a lot of times when you put cabbage in your buggy, I've had people stop me in the store and say, are you making coleslaw? And it's like, no. And I almost feel bad that I'm not making coleslaw. But that's automatically what people think. Now what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to flip this over. See that? It's cooking and it's thawing all at the same time. Cook thawing is a really good method for ground beef, ground pork, ground turkey, ground chicken, ground lamb, any ground meat. Because ground meats, you don't want to serve rare. You want to serve your ground meats thoroughly cooked, well done. And that's why these do so well with the thawing while cooking technique. Now that's coming together, and this is very high quality ground beef. I tend to use the 93% lean, so then there's only 7% fat. So there's not a whole lot of grease in the bottom of the pan. So it actually helps you because you can skip a step. You don't have to drain off your meat because there's really not enough fat to drain off. And when you buy higher qualities of ground beef, then you know you see what you get and you get what you see. At the grocery store, it can look like a huge container, but yet when you start cooking it, it cooks down. I've had people, you know, they pat out these hamburgers, and they make them like this big, and then they put them on the grill and they become this big, and they're a little tall, and they look almost like a meatball. And people are like, how did that happen? But when you buy meats that have high amounts of fat marbled in with the ground beef, then you're going to have shrinkage, and that shrinkage, some people don't care, some people like it, some people say I like my fatty burger and I'm going to have it on the grill, and that's just the way it's going to go, and it's going to drip down on those charcoals and make that fire go up a little bit, and they love that. Well, to each their own. But for me, I tend to go with the leaner cuts. They're healthier too, and I'm always looking for ways to make a recipe more healthy. Okay, this will still keep cooking for a while. I'll cover it in order to not only cook but also steam it. Okay, over here I'm going to need 1 cup of beef broth. Well, I didn't want to buy beef broth because beef broth comes in a can about this size, and it also comes in a container about this size, and I only need 1 cup. So bouillon is a really awesome way to go. Bouillon is all the beef flavorings and some salt and all kinds of yummy goodness in a cube, and it's just a little cube that you uncover. And what I do is I place that cube down into the water, or into a liquid measuring cup. This is a liquid measuring cup. The difference, remember from earlier in class, your liquid measuring cup is your one that has your spout and your handle. And you know, we talked about the different types. There are plastic, there are glass. You know, of course I prefer the glass, but the one drawback to glass is once it, you know, if it breaks, it's got to be replaced. But they tend to hold up really well over the years, the glass ones. So I think they're worth the original investment. So what I do is I have a water machine that spouts out hot water. So I just get a cup of hot water, and I'll let that bouillon cube start to break apart and release its flavoring. And then what I really have is I have beef broth that I didn't have to get a can, and I didn't have to pour some of the can down the drain, or I didn't have a large container where I might have some waste. So these are very handy. I keep the chicken and the beef broth bouillon cubes on hand continually. I'm never without them. So let's check back on our meat. Oh, I wish that you could smell through the computer screen, because your stomach would start to probably growl. Remember our vocabulary word, appetite. Appetite is that you want something to eat, and you want a particular thing to eat, usually based on a trigger, like a smell, or you saw it on a commercial. Something visual, something triggers you to want this certain thing. Hunger is actually the physiological state of being hungry. Your stomach is actually growling. You can have an appetite for popcorn at the movie theater right after you've had dinner, because an appetite for something, you don't really have, you can be full and still have an appetite for something. But with hunger, that is the physiological response that your body has to being hungry, and that's different. Do y'all remember the word satiety? That was a weird word. A lot of you didn't know the meaning of that right off. But satiety is when that you are satisfied. It's like being satiated. You know, you're satisfied and you've had enough food and it's not necessary to continue on. Which satiety, if you remember correctly from our studies, doesn't come on for about 20 minutes. So you can eat dinner all day long and still not be, not feel satisfied or feel that satiety if you eat fast and you don't give your body a chance to get the message. You know, it's important for us to slow down and eat at a slower pace. You know, we train children. This is breaking up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pour it in. It won't hurt anything. We train children to eat quickly in the United States of America because we have lunch schedules and we have to get everybody through the cafeteria in a certain amount of time. So I've worked in, I guess, 5 different schools. It's always about 20 minutes for lunch, and it's completely inappropriate. You should be taking about 40 to 50 minutes at least to eat lunch so that you can sit back and realize whether you are satisfied or not. And not knowing whether or not you're satisfied leads to overeating. And as you know, obesity is the largest health epidemic that our country currently has. It's a crisis, for sure. Okay, now we're going to add some brown sugar, which sounds crazy, but it just works.
Does it give it a sweeter taste?
Yes, that gives it a little bit of sweet. And then the other thing that we're going to add, and you don't need a whole lot of it because it's pretty pungent, is paprika. Now paprika is red in color, and I had a friend when I was growing up, and she had a red colored dog, and she called the dog Paprika, and I always thought that was so neat. So we got a dog later, and she had a brown yellow color to her, so we called her Saffron, which is another spice. Okay, so what we have here is a teaspoon of paprika. That's going to add color. It's going to add flavor. Like I said, it's that little hidden ingredient that somebody doesn't really necessarily know what it is. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they know it's delicious. Salt and pepper, so I'm going to freestyle some salt. And also I'm going to do my pepper the same way because, you know, we don't have to measure everything down to the wire because we're making a dinner type meal. Okay, this all is looking amazing. So we're going to add some diced tomatoes. These are the petite diced tomatoes. It doesn't matter if they're petite. It really doesn't matter. You don't want to drain these off. We need that liquid to make it more soupy. Okay. Something a little brown. Every once in a while you get a piece of leaf. You know, when you deal with canned produce, you know, you sometimes get a little piece of leaf. It's nothing to worry about. I mean, it had a leaf with it originally. Again, another jar of diced tomatoes. The diced tomatoes, they pair really well with the brown sugar and the paprika. And the flavor base for this is just out of sight. And then keep in mind that bouillon cube has melted in here. And so we have some beef broth mixed in as well. And of course you saw me put salt and pepper, garlic, onion, etc. Now I'm going to add some tomato sauce. Oh gosh, it's really starting to smell good in here. This also gives us more liquid because the cabbage needs to have the liquid around it. We're actually gonna raise our heat, not terribly, but a little bit. I'm gonna start adding this cabbage in. And this is when the magic starts happening. That cabbage leaf gets down in there, and that mixture just seasons up. Sometimes I'm a messy cook. You gotta overlook me. But it's okay. I sanitized every surface before I started. We're all good. My hands were nice and clean, so we're good. Okay, now these pieces of cabbage, they will just start to fall apart as you're stirring, as it's cooking, all that good stuff. So I'm going to take a spoon and I'm actually going to get some of this mixture up and over top of the cabbage. Oh yeah. And this cabbage has a green and pale yellow, maybe pale white color to it. It changes completely. It doesn't look like that once it's cooked down. So what we're going to do, now that we've got this mixed and going, so we're just going to leave it in here. We're going to, the mixture isn't going to actually cover the cabbage, but we're going to use the lid of the pot to help that steaming go on. And we're going to leave it on a medium high, and we're going to let it steam. Check on it quite often to make sure it's not scorching on the bottom of the pot. That can happen. I stir mine about every 5 to 8 minutes, and I let it cook for 20 to 40 minutes, usually closer to the 40-minute mark, because I really want to give it a chance to let those flavors combine. I don't personally need my cabbage to have any of its rigidity left in it. I like soft cabbage, so most people do that eat it this way, so that shouldn't be a problem. So like I said, don't forget you would uncover it and stir every 5 to 8 minutes for the next 20 to 40 minutes, closer to 40. And when it's all said and done, you're gonna have a beautiful dinner for your family, a healthy dinner for your family, an economical dinner for your family, and delicious. So we are going to pair this unstuffed cabbage rolls with 2 pieces of, this is a little baguette of French bread, and you know, a hard crusty bread with a little butter on it, not margarine. Remember, we don't want to fool with margarine. That's chemicals, that's man-made. Butter right from the cow, right from God, if you believe in God, whoever you believe in, it's right from there. It's beautiful, and it's just 2 ingredients, and butter's really a masterpiece. It's been given a bad rap for years, and it's not. It's a beautiful God-given gift and a note that helps us to enjoy things like a baguette of bread. So anyway, I hope that some of you will actually try this recipe. I am going to require you to watch this on YouTube. I guess you might be watching because you're required. For the next set of CDL days, I will put this video down as something that you're supposed to watch, and then I would love for you to leave a comment in the comments for me, for some feedback, for me, for my professor. But like I said, this will be on YouTube and easy to find, and I'm glad that you spent some time with me learning, and I miss you, and goodbye.